Good morning, first graders. Happy Friday. We've made it through 3 days of our online learning the first week. We've had some glitches, but hopefully we will continue to do a little bit better next week. So this week we have done our skills, LY, FUL, and OO, and I'll talk about those here in just a second. But to start, we are going to read from our book, our anthology book, like we normally do on Fridays. And this week we have been talking about neighbors. So we have been talking about our neighbors and how we treasure our neighbors and those kinds of things. So today we're going to read a story that's called The Unbeatable Bread. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we treasure neighbors and how we share with one another. And we're going to listen to this story about who Uncle John shares his bread with. And we're going to talk about at the end, why does he want to do this? Why does he want to share the bread? So we're going to read this story here. So it's called The Unbeatable Bread by Lynn Hoops. It says, one dark morning, still dreaming in bed, Uncle John sat up and said, I will bake an unbeatable bread. Bread? Sighed Aunt Lucy. Oh, dread. A wild bread, said Uncle John. A wishing bread, as bright as dawn. His wife gave a tremendous yawn. So this week, tremendous is one of our amazing words. And tremendous is just another word for a really big yawn. Okay, so tremendous is big. Says, Uncle John, the children are grown. We've no one else to eat it, no nieces or nephews or cousins to need it. No grandmas, no grandpas, no good great aunts. Uncle John pulled on his pants. I will bake an unbeatable bread. I'll wake the world from winter's sleep, melt the snow, the dark so deep. I'll break the spell of this long freeze, bring out the children and the honeybees. And Lucy gave a substantial sneeze. Uncle John, you've baked enough. The kitchen is full of poofs and puffs, cookies and crumb cakes with chocolatey chips. Uncle John just licked his lips. I will bake an unbeatable bread, an undefeatable bread. A yes bread, make a mess bread. A loud bread, feed a crowd bed. And Lucy sat straight up and said, Mr. Macon Bread, Mr. Muffin Head, if we have no one to eat it, and we're snowed in tight, you'll be the one to eat every last bite. Now stop your bacon, pack up your pans, stop eating the dough off your hands, stop clanging your spoons, singing your songs, banging about with your bing-bang bongs. I'm baking a bread, sang Uncle John, a waking bread. I'm baking a shaking, waking bread. Aunt Lucy pulled the pillow over her head and knew there'd be no one to eat that bread. Uncle skipped to the kitchen, stuffed with poofs and puffs, pulled out the bread pans and all the bread stuffs, and as he worked, he hummed along, singing his waking baking song. I'm baking a bread, a waking baking bread, baking a shaking waking bread. He mixed in the yellow of the morning sun, a whistle in the wind, clouds on the run. The bread dough rose as he sang along. He rolled it in a loaf, and it wasn't long till the smell of bread baking rose up with his song. It floated upstairs and along the halls, slid out the iced windows through cold, damp walls. It sailed over trees all wrapped in white, wrapped round houses, snowed in tight. The sweet, weedy smell seeped under doors, rose softly ringing through cracks in floors. It floated by firesides in sleepy dogs' yawns, played in fiddles and old French horns, slipped into hats, mufflers, and mittens, wrapped around alley cats and little skinny kittens. Now alone by the window, Uncle watched the snow, blowing deep, drifting slow, and as he watched, he hummed along, whispering his waking, baking song. I'm baking a bread, a waking bread, baking a shaking, waking bread. The sweet smell roamed over snowy billows and great white hills like giant pillows. It blew into bear caves and foxes' dens, woke rabbits and moles and sleeping wrens. It whispered round snowmen, stooped under trees, and whistled in hives of honeybees, rose into bedrooms, rumbled in snores, and crept with the spiders over nursery doors. A waking bread, a shaking bread, baking a shaken, waking bread. Uncle scrubbed up as he sang along, and the smell of bread baking sailed on with his song. It floated over bumps and little lumps. It pulled in quilts and climbed mountains' rumps. Then silently, secretly by it slid, and found them each under pillows hid. Emma and Mia, Lizzie, Sam, Miss Blue. On it went to find Stevie, too. Off with the blankets, off with the spreads, off with the sheets on the winter white beds. The smell of bread reached down deep, lifted them each out of sleep, and waking them with dreams of spring, it wafted them off on great soft wings. The sea sang silver, and the skinny moon smiled as they sailed away the morning miles, and the gray sky ran to gold and red with a perfect browning of the bread. Now here was the sun up and coming, and here was Stevie humming, and a tap on the window, 2, 3, 4. Emma and Mia rapped on the door. Making a bread so fine, Uncle John sang in the big sunshine. Baking a bread so true, there was Lizzie and Sam and old Miss Boo. Baking a bread so proud, up flew the bees in a soft brown cloud. Baking a bread so good, in came the creatures from the wood, rabbits and moles and singing wrens, foxes and bears hungry from their dens. Baking a bread, an undefeatable bread. Aunt Lucy woke to the sun overhead, popped off her pillow to smell that bread. Baking a bread, an unbeatable bread. Aunt Lucy tiptoed out of bed and snuck downstairs to see that bread. Uncle John swung wide the kitchen door, and in they came, dripping on the floor, gathering round and ready, waiting to be fed. A great big bite of the unbeatable bread. So in our story, Uncle John is trying to share and be a neighbor. So let's finish it up. It says, "Oh, no, you won't," said Little Mouse. Oops, sorry. I'm sorry. That was all. I was continuing in the story. All right. So I talked to you about in the beginning that we were going to read this story, and it was about neighbors and how we are treasuring our neighbors. So I asked, why do you think Uncle John wanted to bake his waking bread? So if you think about that, I see that story as he wanted neighbors to wake up and visit him. He also wanted to wake the sleeping creatures from their winter naps, and he wanted the snow to stop and spring to come. So his bread was able to do that. So when we think about this story, we know that this story is not real, but it is something that he could do. He could bake the bread. Whether it would make all that happen, probably not. But it's kind of a fun story that we looked at. So today we're going to continue in our books, and we are going to do our selection story for the week. So this week you guys have been working on your words with Henry and Mudge and Mrs. Hopper's house. So today we're going to concentrate a little bit more on the story words. So we have the word heart, we have the word gargoyle, and we'll show you what a gargoyle is in the story. And we have shiny, we have a tuxedo, and that's when men dress up really, really nice in their tuxedos. And then we have waltz, which is a kind of dance that happens. Okay, so it's a type of a dance. you will still see some of your high frequency words in our story as well. Okay, so today our story is Henry and Mudge and Mrs. Hopper's house, and I'll come a little bit closer in a second. But again, I want to review that in our story we're also going to see some of our skills that we've worked on, the ly, the ful, and that oo that says ooh. So we've got our suffixes and then our vowel sound in moon. So I'm going to go ahead and read our story. We'll have a little bit of, I'll kind of stop and talk about the story a little bit as we go through. And then you guys are going to fill out your listening, usually is our listening comprehension sheet that you guys do at Listening Center. But you're going to fill that out for me today at home as well. Now, I know that you don't have your books to see the story this way, but I did, in your list of packets, send home the story Henry and Mudge in Mrs. Hopper's house on paper. So you guys are going to need to read this to your parents after I have read the story to you, and then you can use this to help you finish that trifold Henry and Mudge listening comprehension sheet. So we'll go ahead and look at our story for the week. So our story is called Henry and Mudge and Mrs. Hopper's House by Cynthia Rylant. It's illustrated by Carol Bracken in the style of Susia Stevens. Our genre for today is realistic fiction. So the realistic fiction has a setting that seems real, but the stories are made up. So next we will find out what happens when Henry and Mudge visit a neighbor. So our story is, again, realistic fiction. That means it's a story that's made up, but it could really happen. So that's what we need to remember. Okay? And this one, our question of the week, again, is what treasures can we share with neighbors? So you're going to see what they share with their neighbor today. I'll come just a little bit closer, sorry. All right. So this one says, a sweetheart dance. It says Valentine's Day was coming. Henry and his big dog Mudge loved Valentine's Day because of the candy. They liked the candy hearts that said, you're swell, and oh dear, and things like that. Henry read the words and Mudge licked them off. They were a good team. On this Valentine's Day, Henry's father and Henry's mother were going to a sweetheart dance. Henry and Mudge would be staying with Mrs. Hopper. Now, if I stop and think about our setting right now, our setting is where? Our setting is in the house. It's at Valentine's Day, so we also know when. Okay, and then if I think about the characters right now, the characters that we have been introduced to are Henry and Mudge, which is the boy and the dog, and then Henry's parents. It says, Mrs. Hopper lived across the street in a big stone house with droopy trees and dark windows and a gargoyle on the door. So I'm going to come really close. And right here is a gargoyle. So a gargoyle is simply just a animal of some sort that's usually not a real animal. Okay, and it's just some sort of a statue or something. For this one, it happens to be the door knocker. So it's a little gargoyle animal that they knock with the little loop. So a gargoyle is just simply something of some sort of a figurine or a statue of an animal, whether that animal be real or not. Okay? It says, Henry liked Mrs. Hopper, but he did not like her house. Are you sure Mudge and I can't come to the sweetheart dance? Henry asked his father. So think in your head, why might he not like Mrs. Hopper's house? So if you look kind of at her house, and if you think about what he said over here on this page, what is some reasons he might not like it? When I think about that, I think he doesn't like those droopy trees. It talked about the darker windows, okay? And he might even be a little bit afraid of that gargoyle that's on the door. All right, now we were introduced kind of to a new character, and that was Mrs. Hopper, and we saw her little picture there. It says, only if you both promise to wear a tuxedo and shiny black shoes and waltz to the Blue Danube, said Henry's father. Henry looked at Mudge and tried to imagine him in a tuxedo and shiny black shoes, waltzing to the Blue Danube. I think this is a funny picture. It shows what he's thinking in his head. What would Mudge look like in a tuxedo and dancing? I think we'd better go to Mrs. Hopper's, Henry said. Good idea, said Henry's father, because Mudge only knows how to tap dance, Henry said with a grin. So he was being kind of silly. This one says costumes, and you can see here this is now Mrs. Hopper, and we have a new character coming into our story. So it says Mrs. Hopper wasn't like anyone Henry had ever met. She played the violin for him. She served him tea. She told him about her father, who had been a famous actor. She was very kind to Mudge. She cooked him a bowl of oatmeal and gave him his own loaf of French bread. After the tea and music and oatmeal, Mrs. Hopper took them upstairs. She opened a room that had been her father's. Wow, said Henry. The room was full of costumes. There were silk capes and tall hats and shiny coats. There were canes and swords and umbrellas. There were wigs. So if I'm thinking about this, Henry was a little nervous about going over to his neighbor's house. But when I see what's happening, I think that they're really actually enjoying themselves. And Mrs. Hopper seems to be very nice and somebody that is very caring. Mrs. Hopper put a wig on Mudge. You look like a poodle, Mudge, said Henry. Mudge wagged and wagged. Henry and Mudge and Mrs. Hopper spent most of the evening in the costume room. They had a wonderful time. And when Henry's parents came back from the dance, were they ever surprised? Mudge was a poodle, and Henry was a man. Henry wore a tuxedo and a hat and shiny black shoes. I bet you didn't know I was this handsome, Henry told his dad. And everyone laughed and laughed. So our story today talked a lot about a treasure with a neighbor. He was kind of nervous at first to go over. And then once he went over there, he realized that she was really a lot of fun. And it sounds like they had a great time together. So today, we usually do this on your own or actually with Miss Jennifer. So parents, feel free to support because I do usually have a parent volunteer. But what I want you to do is I want you to read the story again with your parents. And then I want you to fill out our trifold sheet on Henry and Mudge and Mrs. Hopper's house. So all you're going to be doing is answering those questions. I'm just going to go ahead and open them up really quick and go through it with you. So it says, how do Henry and Mudge feel about each other? So how does the boy and the dog feel about each other? Here it says, why does Henry not like Mrs. Hopper's house? So I kind of discussed that in our reading. Then here it says, where is this story taking place? There are two settings. So I want you to think about that and give me two places as far as where the story was taking place. On the back, it says, what does Henry say that tells you how he feels? So this could be before he goes to Mrs. Hopper's house, or you could talk about how he felt after he went to Mrs. Hopper's house, maybe when his parents picked him up. So there's two different places you could talk about how he felt. And then here it says, why does everyone laugh at the end of the story? So you need to write from your thoughts down below. I do want your parents to take a picture of this and send it to me, both sides, please, so that I can see that you had understanding of our story today. Okay, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do 3 pages in our book today for our phonics, and then we will be done with our book for this week. So on this page, we're going to still continue to practice our ly and ful suffixes. So here it says write the suffix ly or ful and then write the word. So we're simply going to read the sentence and see which one makes sense. So it says, I went glad. Sorry, I don't know if I clicked off or not. My computer did. Okay, so I went glad, and you're going to look up here, and it's glad what? Lee. So all I'm going to do is put ly, and then over here, I'm just going to write the word gladly. Then over here it says the swimmers were care. Were they carely or careful? Well, we know our word is careful, so I'm going to add ful, and then I'm going to write the word careful. Okay, you're going to continue to do that for problems 3 through 8. Then down here at the bottom, you need to write the word to complete the sentence. These are going to be your 2 high frequency words. So it says, I went blank the street. Then it says blank, I saw my friend. So you're going to use these 2 words, your high frequency words, to fill in those 2 blanks. All right, on the next page, which actually you're going to turn, and it's going to be on page 503 because you've already completed 502. So on 503, you're going to circle the word that is spelled correctly for 1 through 4. So here, which one says sadly correctly? Well, I can see the first one does, so I would circle sadly. Here, which one says gladly correctly? Well, I can see that gladly is this one. You're going to do the same thing with 3 and 4. Down here, it says write the list word in the puzzle. So if it says in a nice way, that means nicely. So on 7 across, I'm going to write nicely. Okay, number 9, it says in a slow way. So I know if I'm doing something in a slow way, I'm doing it slowly. So on number 9, I'm going to write slowly. And then you're going to continue and finish 10, 5, 6, and 8, which seems kind of out of, but you're going to finish the next 4 for me. All right, and then the last page we're going to do reviews our adjectives that compare. So on our adjectives that compare, we're simply just going to mark the sentence that has the line under the adjective. So here it says, Miss Feld's lawn is greener than Mrs. Ho's lawn. They all say the same thing, but which one has the adjective underlined? Is it greener, lawn, or is? Well, I know the comparative adjective is greener, so I'm going to fill in the top bubble on number 1. Okay, let's look at number 2. It says, Mr. Jones has the brownest lawn of all. So is it Mr. Jones, has, or brownest? I know that the comparative adjective is brownest, so I would fill in the 3rd bubble or the bottom bubble on number 2. So you're going to continue to do that 3 through 6. So today, in your phonics books, again, let me just review. Let me go back really quick. You're going to be doing page 501, 503, and then 504. And you guys will send that to me in an email. The other thing that will be sent to me in an email is your comprehension sheet about our story, Henry and Mudge and Mrs. Hopper's House. I hope you guys all have a great weekend, and I will see you again on Tuesday, and hopefully next week will go a little bit smoother. All right, we'll talk to you later. Bye.